You're listening to Autistic Viewpoints with Turrell, Burgess, and Daria Brown, where we talk about our past and present autistic experiences and some of our passions, including DIRFloortime, music, sports, neurodivergent relationships, and much more.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Autistic Viewpoints. My name is Turrell.
And I'm Daria. And we're so thrilled to have this new podcast. So we're going to start by introducing ourselves. Do you want to go first, Turrell?
I'd love to. My name is Turrell Burgess. I work with ICDL in a variety of ways. I'm also a best-selling children's book author. So I wrote and published What's with the New Kid? My Autism, My Story, which got released in 2021 and eventually landed me a job right here at ICDL. I'm super, super excited to be on this podcast. I'm super excited to be a co-host on this podcast, and I'm super excited to do it with the lovely Miss Daria Brown. Daria?
Thanks so much, Turrell. I'm super excited too. So my story is that I had a son when he was 2. He had a massive seizure. We were in the hospital for 4 months. And upon release, because he had regressed developmentally, we also found out he had an autism diagnosis. So right there, that's a whole can of worms that I can unpack another time. But that led me to finding DIRFloortime, and floor time became my passion. And I started the website affectautism.com, where our podcast here is hosted. I started the We Chose Play podcast, and it is the 10th anniversary of Affect Autism. Can you believe it, Turrell?
I certainly can believe it.
You know, I designed it for parents who were navigating being a parent of an autistic child and sort of documenting what I was learning as I was going along. It eventually led to, just like Turrell was discovered by ICDL, I was taking courses at ICDL, actually sort of around the same time. Like I started taking DIR courses, and I knew Dr. Gil Tippy. He was the first real DIR floor time mentor that helped me understand floor time and my son. And that led to me being the parent advocate at ICDL, the International Council on Development and Learning. And I have been working with them since early 2018, but full-time since November 2021. And that's how I met Turrell. And Turrell, your 4th anniversary of working at ICDL is coming up.
Yep, September 1st, 2021.
So it is your 4-year anniversary, and it is my website's 10-year anniversary. And why not branch out into the world of neurodiversity? Because so much has changed since my son was diagnosed. The release of the book Neurotribes by Steve Silberman, and then COVID. And during COVID, I just saw an explosion of information about neurodiversity out there. Lots of new neurodiversity affirming services out there, and lots of different. Are we putting you to sleep, Turrell?
No. I'm one of those people that I go to bed late, but I wake up early. I don't know how it's possible, but
So these
but
are
it's
the kinds
possible.
of things we're going to talk about on our podcast. So sleep, hey, that's a big one. Autistics and sleep. I mean, that's one of the main things that comes up when people, especially parents, talk about their autistic kids is sleep. So let's put that on the docket for a future discussion.
Yeah.
So I know we discussed different things we're going to talk about on this podcast. And like I said, with the neurodiversity podcasts explosion, I see a lot of podcasts where autistics are talking about their experiences. And I said, well, hey, Turrell and I are both autistic. Why don't we talk about our experiences too, with a little twist? Because we're DIR, we're developmental individual differences, relationship based floor timers, and let's throw that in the mix. But because we want it to have a broad reach, we're going to be talking about a number of different topics. So you mentioned a few of them, Turrell. I think it'll be fun to talk about the things we like, the sensory issues we might have, different kinds of experiences with food when we were little, and how it's changed into adulthood. We will definitely talk about floor time. We'll do some reflections. We definitely will talk about pop culture. Turrell loves movies. I love music. You love gaming. We both have been sports fans. I think you're a much more bigger sports fan than me now, but I grew up being a big sports fan. And Turrell brought this up, Canadian fun facts. Because I'm Canadian, this is what autistics do. We say, she's Canadian. Beep, beep, beep. Everything Canadian in our head gathers. And so whenever he hears stuff about Canada, he says, oh, by the way, blah, 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 Canada fun facts. So we're going to include Canada fun facts. What else do you think we're going to be talking about, Turrell?
Yeah, you mentioned sports, movies, and food, especially. I'm always curious for the audience to really know us on a personal level. I feel like Autistic Viewpoints is a perfect space for the both of us to share our own experiences. Whether we've grown up autistic or, in your case, having an autistic son, and how both challenging and how rewarding it's been. I know for me, it's been incredibly rewarding because I was diagnosed when I was 3. I mean, I bet you if I told you that, you probably wouldn't think, really. But it's the truth. In fact, when I wrote the book, I explained my experiences of going to a new school as the only autistic kid in his class. And it was challenging at first, but I have a sister who has always had my back. She had my back at the time, and she still has my back to this day. So that's one of the things I definitely want to talk about. The thing is, if you have the people that you love that are always in your corner, then you can do anything.
And we call that the R in DIR, relationships.
Yes, ma'am.
I love it. You made me think of something. Let's just suffice it to say that autistic viewpoints come with as many autistics as there are. Everybody's different. Definitely, as autistic people, we have similar experiences and similar tendencies to certain things, but everybody has so many individual differences that are unique to them. I'm in between the age of your mom and your dad, so we definitely are in a different generation. I'm Gen Z, and what? I'm not Gen Z.
Gen X.
Gen
Gen
X. Oh my
X.
goodness, I'm getting my letters. See,
I'm a millennial.
when
You're
you
Gen
get to
X.
be Gen X, your brain starts to stop working. And I said Z, but I meant X, and it's actually Z in Canada. For a Canada fun fact, are you comfortable saying your age, or would you rather keep it private?
I am 30 years old, and I do not feel like I'm 30 at all.
I just turned 55, and no way do I feel anywhere near what in my mind I imagine.
I was gonna say, Daria, you do not look 55 at all.
I've heard this said many times that autistics are young in whatever spirit, presence, whatever. We're younger. Everybody thinks we're younger than we are. And I don't know if that's due to having a playful nature. I know that I certainly have a very playful nature. Maybe that's another thing that we'll get into is playful discussions. But
Probably, yeah.
we will definitely have different guests on that are not necessarily related to DIR, but will be interesting. Our first guest will be Kylo Robinson. And just
Yes.
like the podcast I had with Turrell about his book that he shared, I'll link to it in the show notes. I did a podcast with Kylo Robinson and his mother, Shell Abraham Montgomery, and they run an organization called Spectrum Success 911 in Philadelphia. They just finished their awesome ambassadors workshop where they work with adolescents and youth, and they're amazing. I love them. I can't wait for Kylil to be our first guest. And they presented at ICL's conference last year, so we got to meet them in person. I just met up with them again a few weeks ago when I was in Philadelphia with my son. And we have other guests lined up, but we're going to keep those behind the wraps for now. But I don't know how often we're going to be doing this podcast, Turrell. Like maybe once a month or once every 6 weeks ish for now.
Probably, yeah.
Something like that. Because I mean,
Yep.
we're busy. We have full-time jobs.
I love the fact that I'm doing this podcast with you. The thing is, nobody at our workplace knew that we were doing this. We've kept this under wraps for how long? A few months. Like, we've been planning this for months, but nobody knew until we finally made it official on social media just recently.
And, I just thought the world needs to get to know you, Turrell. Like, people are sick of hearing just me talking all the time on my podcast. We need some Turrell in this world. So, I want to
Thank you.
point people to the podcast I did with Turrell because he really introduced himself and his history, if you will, in that podcast. So we're not going to repeat all of that, but you will certainly hear snippets from future episodes that we do together.
One thing's for sure, I'm a lot thinner now than when I was back then. So, uh,
I wouldn't have noticed because on Zoom we just see your head and shoulders.
yeah, but I notice, so
Well, that's funny because I'm heavier than I was back when we did the podcast. So we transferred weight from you to me. That was in my bodybuilding days. And post COVID and other things that women go through in my age group have affected my weight. And I am hoping to, I am beginning to start to work out again for the first time after having numerous injuries over the last few years. I swear, Turrell, every body part I've had has been injured in the last few years. So I'm going to start weight training again, which is very important to keep you young, your body young. My mind is always young.
I was literally in the hospital a few months ago, okay, for something that I thought was a heart issue. And Katie Shepard, our coworker here at ICDL, who also lives in North Carolina where I live, was actually by my side as I was getting checked out. God bless her. And thankfully, it wasn't a heart issue. It was just very bad acid reflux. Obviously, as you get older, but eventually you're going to just start feeling your age. That's what I've been told.
I'm laughing at you because you're only 30. I didn't start thinking of this stuff until I was over 50. So it's amusing to me to hear someone 30 talking about being old. But I will tell you, my most depressing birthday was turning 20. I felt
Really.
so old. Oh my God, I'm not a kid anymore. I'm not a teenager. It was way worse than turning 30, 40, or 50 for me. Did you just hear that huge crack of thunder?
I did not.
Zoom blocked it out. We're getting a thunderstorm here in the Toronto area.
It's raining down here.
That's one thing we forgot to do is say where we live. You're in North Carolina. I'm just outside of Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
I still have never been to Toronto. I wanted to visit. It's just I've heard so much about the country in general, and
Wait, have you ever been to Canada?
no, I've always wanted to go in general. Because I know Toronto is probably the most recognizable city in the country. I think it has over 2 million people. I'm not sure. But I know it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest. You probably don't know about this, but I actually know quite a bit about Canada.
Canadian fun facts.
I know that Canadians are very serious about their hockey. I know that one of their biggest food delicacies is poutine, which, fun fact, is actually a big hangover cure as well.
And we've
You
had this
know,
discussion before. It's more a Quebec thing than a Canada thing, but in the last few years, it is more popular and available in other parts of Canada. But yes, it's a very French Canadian thing. And if you go to Montreal, you should see the types of poutine places they have there. They have with smoked meat, with added this, with added that. Like you can get any toppings you want in this poutine, and it's ridiculous. I am a fan of the plain old French fries, cheese curds, and gravy. But it has to be the specific Quebec cheese curds, which they probably also have in Wisconsin because we know Wisconsin is cheeseland. But
yes,
the gravy too. Like if you try and buy poutine in Ontario, it's pretty gross, honestly, unless you go to a good authentic place because they use like crappy gravy and they use like melted cheese. Like no, that's not
that's
poutine.
not authentic poutine.
Yeah.
The thing is just, oh yes, and I often would tell Daria, okay, listen, Quebec is still part of Canada, which means poutine is a Canadian delicacy. Okay, so
That's like saying smoked brisket is American. What would Texans think?
We won't get
um,
into the French Canadian, Anglo Canadian politics at all, but yes, Quebec is a
right.
part of Canada. And yes, poutine is beloved by most Canadians. Yes.
But yeah, so
I don't want to speak for all
but
Canadians.
I know.
Just like I don't want to speak for all autistics or all women or all Gen Xers or whatever.
Sports.
what I was gonna say is, what I said about like how Canadians are very serious about their hockey. It's crazy because I didn't start watching hockey until just over 10 years ago. And then over the last 5 years, I started to really get into it. In fact, I went to my first NHL game in 2024. The Toronto Maple Leafs were in town to face the Carolina Hurricanes. And I quickly realized how big of a fan base that the Maple Leafs have
Oh my goodness.
because they are everywhere,
They
literally.
are
Okay.
beyond passionate. Toronto Maple Leaf fans are like on another level, seriously. Now, I will say I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, which is otherwise known as South Detroit, and I'm a
Mhm.
Detroit fan. Detroit Tigers, Detroit Red Wings, the Pistons, the Lions, University of Michigan, what do you call it? Go Blue. Like that is what we watched growing up. I'm from back in the day before cable TV, and we had Detroit media, Detroit television shows. Sesame Street was on in Spanish, although we did have a Canadian channel and it was in French as well. So I did get a bit of French and a bit of Spanish from Sesame Street because of both. But unlike most Canadians, I'm a Detroit fan because of being born and raised in Windsor.
Got it, got it. Well, sorry, you said Michigan and my eyes lit up because my brother-in-law is a Michigan football fan. And I'm so glad I don't have a set hockey team because I'm pretty sure if I mentioned like the Blackhawks or the Penguins, then probably wouldn't end good with it.
Well,
So
I can tell you that the Blackhawks had Canadians on there that were on Team Canada youth and that ended up on the Blackhawks. Of course, the Penguins, did they not have Sidney Crosby?
uh,
Okay, so he's Canadian.
yeah, most hockey players playing in the NHL are either Canadian or Swedish or Finnish. So like that's like 80%, I think close to 80% of the NHL. So I mean like I just really got into it because it's because hockey is actually very entertaining.
DIR floor time.
So I never told anyone this, but I thought I knew a lot about myself before I came to ICDO. It wasn't until I took two DIR 101 courses that I really started to understand and look back on my life from a different perspective. Then I get to replay those moments in my head and realize like, yeah, like this was definitely capacity one or capacity two or three. And I'm pretty sure as we do more of these podcasts, we'll be able to explain more about what these capacities are. And I think that's part of the reasons why I just truly value my time here at ICDL and why I'm truly, truly honored and excited to do this podcast with you.
Well, we're super excited since you joined us, and I would love to dive into that a little bit because developmental, individual differences, relationship-based model, DIR floor time. The course DIR 101 is an introduction to DIR and DIR floor time. And Turrell took it twice. And I'm so eager for you to share with our listeners some of the stuff we talked about before that we discussed we would talk about on the podcast, because I just felt like your viewpoints and reflections about it were so interesting compared with what I hear from other DIR experts who aren't autistic. So I would love for you to share your understanding of capacity one, self-regulation, and interest in the world.
When I think about that capacity, it's simple. I actually want to bring an example. What's with the New Kid, the book I wrote. Before I arrived at Oakwood Avenue, I would say that I was probably in capacity three or four. But I was back in capacity one when I moved to Oakwood because I was in a completely different environment I didn't know a single soul there. I didn't know if I was going to fit in there. It was completely new to me. I had to learn to get comfortable relatively quickly. I didn't know if I truly embraced myself at the time. But then once I got to Oakwood and once people like started to understand and learn about my story, I think that's when I essentially went from, being out of my element and being like dysregulated among my classmates to moving into capacity two. Because, like I said before, I had a sister who was no, and I have a sister who is very, very supportive, and she's had my back literally since we were babies. I know I'm the oldest of three. We're about a year and a few months apart, but my sister's always had my back, and especially at that young of an age, she definitely has been my backbone and was one of the many reasons why I was a lot more comfortable talking to people at Oakwood and why I was able to truly express myself. Because let me tell you, 10-year-old me is not the same as 30-year-old me now. I would definitely consider that a prime example of capacity one.
Can you think of examples? What kinds of things would make you feel unsafe? When did you get dysregulated? Can you think of any examples from when you were even younger?
I went to a school known as Sawtell Learning Center. It's located in Paramus, New Jersey, and my parents felt like I wasn't getting the inclusion that I needed. So inclusion that I was taking classes with regular students, with non-autistic students, it was an opportunity for me to bond and be in the same classroom with those students. But and I was supposed to get three inclusion classes, but I only got one. And so after my fourth grade year, they took me out and enrolled me at Oakwood Avenue Elementary. Obviously, at the time, I didn't know why they took me out, but it was definitely quite an experience. Just like another experience I had when I was 9 in 2004, I went to a day camp called Harbor Haven, and I didn't really know what to expect, but it wasn't until I got to camp when I realized that the campers were just like me. You know, I went to a camp in which neurodivergent kids attended, and I realized that, Turrell, they're exactly like you know, and they also have a story, just like you have a story, and they're also trying to get themselves regulated as well. And so, obviously, when I went to that camp, like over time, like with every week that I spend at that camp, I end up moving over to capacity two, which is engaging and relating and building that relationship with the campers and with the instructors too. I didn't know if I wasn't fully on board at the time, but now that I attended that camp for exactly 4 consecutive years, I'm very, very proud that I was able to do that because I got to meet some pretty cool people and I got to truly experience what summer camp is like.
I know that something that definitely made me dysregulated when I was a child is if someone would try and pick me up. Like I had cousins that were like 4 to 12 years older than me. So
Hmm.
they would usually do this to my little brother, like pick him up and spin him around. If anyone tried to do that with me, like I would immediately scream so loud, like they'd have to put me down. I was also a very loud kid, like my son is a very loud kid. He inherited that from me, the volume of our voices, and I would scream. Like I couldn't stand being moved. Like I now know that that's the vestibular sense or whatever. And also I remember like my dad owned a swimming pool company, and so we had a pool, and until I was 7 years old, I would not put my head underwater. And if even a drip splashed on my face, I'd be like, ah, pass me a towel. And I'd like have to wipe my face. Like I was super freaked out about stuff like that. And then when I was 7, I took all the lessons at the Y and like got all my badges and stuff and swimming underwater, diving, backflips, everything. Yeah, that was a couple of examples of me getting dysregulated.
Yeah.
Okay, so even though the capacities are not like a ladder or steps or levels per se, these capacities all sort of develop together, but we'll tend to see emergence of each one. It's not necessarily like step, step, step in a linear progression. It's sort of like a hierarchy of developmental progress or whatever. So you mentioned a bit about regulation, feeling uneasy at your new school, but as you settled in, you felt yourself being able to relate and engage with others. And what is your take on this capacity, relating and engaging? Functional, emotional, developmental capacity, FEDC 2.
Honestly, I think this is a perfect opportunity for anyone in this capacity to truly, like, this is more of the coming out of your shell capacity, if you could call it that, you know, because I obviously know going to a school in which you didn't know a single soul was very scary, but honestly, capacity two is probably the one I relate to the most, and that's been the same way throughout my entire life. Every time I meet someone new, every time I go to a new school, every time I attend a new class, it's always been that way. I consider myself lucky to learn more about the capacities and DIR because, again, I didn't really know this about myself until I took those classes. You know, my boss was actually the one who suggested I take these classes. I'm glad he suggested that because since I took it twice, I was able to really gain like an even bigger understanding of it.
I feel like, and I could be wrong, that you are easier to relate and engage with someone. You seem very warm and easily approachable. And I would say, as a child and as a teen and as an adult, a young adult, I was very slow to engage and relate with others. I don't know if it was a matter of being shy or definitely being reserved for sure. Unless I was totally, totally comfortable and totally feeling more at ease, I just wouldn't be the type to initiate relating and engaging so much. I would say that's definitely changed as I've aged.
Of course. Believe it or not, there was a time where I was a complete introvert. It may be hard to believe, but it's the truth. There was a time where I was a complete introvert. But I mean, like, if you talk to my friends from like middle and high school and college, they would be like, they're absolutely not. There's no way this guy wasn't. Nope, it's true.
Reflections.
In the fifth grade, when you go to a school, when you're the only autistic kid, scary because you don't know how they're going to react. And so, I'm just very, very thankful that my experience was such a smooth experience. In fact, because of my old mentor by the name of Gail Velox, she came into my life when I was like 11 or 12, and she was actually my mom's old guidance counselor when she was in high school. She was actually retired at one point, but she came to help me because she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And so when my book got released, we actually reconnected because my father actually kept in contact with her all those years. And that day was the first time I called her and was able to talk with her. It was the first time we were able to talk in years. Obviously, my voice changed and everything, but he still recognized me. I sent her a copy of my book, and I think it was like a few weeks later, she sent me a check with a note that she wrote. I still have that note. It's sitting in my car, and I never got rid of it because it's very sentimental to me. But also because
Do you follow my advice and take a picture of that note in case anything ever happens to it, or
not yet, but I know where it is.
do it? Take a picture of it, because if you ever lost it or something happened, someone threw it out by accident thinking it was garbage or God knows what,
Yeah,
you'll have a picture of it, which is not as good as the main thing, but I'm worried for you.
yeah. Trust me. I'll make sure that I have that. I didn't know at the time, but that conversation was the last time I actually spoke with her because that day we exchanged phone numbers, and there were times where I wanted to call her, but she was a very busy lady. So I was like, you know what? I'll call her eventually. I'll see. Then a few months later, I found out that she actually passed away at the age of 83, and I was an absolute wreck. I because I felt so much guilt at that point. I basically just said to myself, I had all this time to reach out to her, and now I'm never going to have that chance. And my parents and my grandparents tell me all the time, Turrell, it's not your fault. You didn't know she was going to, but I mean, but I had several opportunities to reach out to her, and I didn't do that, and so that's always going to be in the back of my mind, especially as I move forward. But I know that she's proud of me. I know that she's been a huge, huge part of my life. I don't even get sad when I think about her anymore. Every time I think about her, I just smile now. And sometimes there were times where I was like, what, if you were here, what would you have done? All I can do is just continue carrying on and just do what I know will make her proud.
It's a very common thing for autistics to experience guilt a lot more than allistics or non-autistics. Now, is that empirical evidence? No. But I know that rumination is something that's very common among autistics. And I can think of things that happened in grade school that I still feel guilty about. And people will say, you were just a kid. Just remembering things, like, people move on. They're not going to hold stuff against you from childhood or whatever, like little childhood squabbles. but I still feel guilty about it and like get so worked up sometimes if I think of things that happened in the past that I feel guilty about. So I think that's a pretty normal autistic experience that you would feel those things. But I also agree with your parents and grandparents that you did not have any ill intentions. But I can relate with your feeling of wishing that you would have reached out.
And that's why every single week I always call my grandparents. They're my only set of grandparents. And so I call them every single week just to check in on them. In fact, I just recently got back from Florida last month because I was in Florida for a few weeks with them. They are incredible. They've literally been in my life since the day I was born. So they're my only set of grandparents. They're my maternal grandparents. My paternal grandparents passed away. My paternal grandfather died before I was born, and my paternal grandma died when I was 3, I believe.
I absolutely love that you specified they're my maternal grandparents and then you talked about your paternal, because as an autistic person, I need to know these details. I love people's biographies. I love learning about people's lives and, how many siblings they have, like where they grew up, anything that they're comfortable sharing. I love all of that stuff. And to me, that's the first thing I wonder when people say grandparents. I'm like, is it on the mother's side or is it on the father's side? Or if they say cousin, I'm like, is it on the mother's side or on the father's side? I wonder about these things. So I appreciate that you specified it without me having to ask. Not that I would have asked, but it's I don't know if that's an interesting autistic thing to do either. But this brings us to another topic that I think we'll wrap up with today for our first episode, which is the dedication of our podcast. Turrell and I both felt very strongly that we wanted to dedicate this podcast, and I will let you describe, Turrell.
Okay. I think I'll probably go because remember I told you that I took 2 DIR 101 courses. The first one was with our boss, Jeffrey Gunzel, but the second trainer, her name was Kashina Holder. She was a DIR training leader. She was also the principal, I believe, of her own school back in Barbados. Such a wonderful woman. And when I first took that class, that was the first time I met her. And obviously, I had the chance to meet her in March of 2024 when we were all in New York for the in-person conference. And there was actually I don't wait. Do you want me to share this moment now, or should we wait for another episode?
Well, no, we can share it, but I'll just say a couple words too. So our beloved colleague Kashina Holder sadly passed away in December of 2024 of a stroke, and she was very young. She was in her early 40s, and
42.
she started a school in Barbados, a DIRFloortime school. And I was so lucky to have done 2 podcasts with her. And I did not hesitate to tell her that they were my favorite podcasts because the way she described co-regulation was so different than anyone else I had heard describe what it's like to really co-regulate with somebody. And so I've highlighted that podcast and referred back to it so many times that I said to her, we need to do another podcast. And thank goodness we got it in, because we tried to schedule that podcast for months. And finally, we recorded it in October. And none of us knew that she wouldn't be around in December. So I was so grateful to have that second podcast with her, which is so helpful to so many parents. And I know I've spoken with so many parents she was their floor time coach, virtual floor time coach. And they just thought she was absolutely incredible, the way that she helped them understand how to connect with their children. And so Kashina just really had this beautiful way about her. She was so relaxed and calm. She was always smiling, and she made everything very matter of fact. It was the way she taught, and everything was she was just so good at what she did. I mean, she found her calling and she was so good at it. And we were all just absolutely crushed when we lost her. So we definitely want to dedicate this podcast to her. And so as part of that, as I mentioned, we're going to have little segments like food, floor time, reflections, pop culture stuff.
Yeah.
One of them is going to be Kashina moments. And so why don't you leave us with that wonderful, humorous Kashina moment from the first time both of us met her, March 2024, in person at that conference in New York City. And you have a wonderful memory to share from that.
Yes, so it was the final day of the conference, and me and Morgan, a coworker of ours, we were struggling to roll up a particular, like, I don't know if it was a banner or a poster, but whatever it was. It was so huge, and I don't know what the deal was with that box, but it was just we couldn't get it in. And Kashina and Becky, another colleague of ours, they were laughing the whole time, and it was so. I mean, in fact, they even laid down on the on the poster, and it was so fun. I don't know who took it. I believe it was our colleague Katie who took that photo, and she sent it to me. And every time I look at that photo, I mean, like, I don't even get sad. I get happy, you know. And let me tell you why I get happy, because, you know, it just shows us that humorous side of Kashina. I wish I had the opportunity to know her more when I was here. Obviously, I've had the pleasure of hosting her on these institute meetings with the rest of the training leaders. And so, and I can speak for everyone when I say that not a day goes by that we don't think about her. I think that that day was probably, I couldn't imagine what her family was feeling that day, because as her ICDO family, we were absolutely crushed, you know. And I was doing a good job keeping my emotions in check until Becky actually cried during that meeting, and that's when I kind of lost it. But then I realized it's okay to show these emotions. You know, you lost someone that you truly cared about. But I mean, but for many of us, Kashina wasn't just a coworker, she was a genuine friend of ours. We had an opportunity to say goodbye to her in January when her funeral was online. I'm super lucky to have known her. I'm super lucky to have called her a colleague, and to know that she has done so many great things for her country and for her school, and especially for her what she's done for her family. So I say, Kashina, we love you, we miss you, and continue watching over us.
Please, everybody, check the show notes for some of the references I made to past podcasts that I've done with Turrell and with Kylil, our guest coming next episode. And
Yeah, I can't wait for that.
yeah, it's going to be great. I hope you've enjoyed our first episode. And please let us know what types of things you would like to hear us speak about and anything else. Thank you so much, Turrell, for a fun first episode.
Yeah, it was great. It was great, and I'm looking forward to many more.
Me too.